How you doing, hon? All right, hey guys. I believe it started up. Let me see if the live stream's running on my computer on this other one here. Uh, Welcome to another Meet and Shoot member event. This one based on photographic composition and all that artsy stuff. Pretty much just compositional elements and breaking it down to and having it make you are the ingredients that make your photography better. All right, so it looks like it's queuing up. Yeah, looks great. Let me just check, make sure the audio is working good. Sorry about this, guys. There's really not a good way for me to do this with hard testing it without making sure, without checking the live stream itself. Once I confirm it, we're going to be good to start. All right, sounds good. All right, guys. Photographic composition. This is going to be a pretty good presentation. I think you guys are going to get a lot out of it. The only main thing I'll go ahead and say is a lot of this is just rules and guidelines that you can follow. Really pretty eye-opening stuff if you take it as it is, but just not stuff that you have to follow, to the letter to get good results with. All right. Before we go on, a little bit about Meet and Shoot. A lot of you guys know what it is already, but for those who are completely new, and this might be their first member streaming event, Meet and Shoot is an organized photography meetup group based in Atlanta, Georgia. We promise to deliver amazing photo shoot, great workshops and classes, stellar models, well-planned themes, high-end equipment, and a great and unique experience. How I equate it to people is it's more like a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant and you order a meal, you know what you're getting. You know what you want off the menu. Meet and Shoot is an organized photo shoot where we say, this is the theme, this is the look, this is the models you can expect, and this is the location. If you're interested in this on the menu, that's what you pay for. And then at the end of it all, you don't clean up at the restaurant. You don't take your plates away. Someone serves you. Pretty much you enjoy the meal. You get to go home and you get to think about the meal and nothing else. That's what we do at Meet and Shoot. We do all of the labor, and you get to take the photos, and they're your photos. That's essentially what we do. We're a workshop service company, and we love what we do. We've been doing it for a while. As always, we have a bunch of cool shoots in the pipeline. Check out our meetup.com page or our website. Shoots can range from free to members or have a low cost or be somewhere in between. Our rates are really competitive for shoots. I think you guys will love it. The amount of shoots we have too, average to about 40 to 50 a year. I want to say a big thank you. Last night we had our annual member meetup. Essentially, it's a meet and shoot that's just set up as a big thank you to all of the people who are a part of our membership program. It was great, guys. It was I would say about 55 photographers, 13 models or 12 models. You could see them on the upper right. It was outstanding. We had 10 active locations for shooting, rotating a few models around. So that's why we didn't have exactly every model at a station. There was a lot of people, a lot of happy people. It was great. There was pizza, beers, stuff like that. Just a general good time. And the weirdest part is it was the first member event we had we charged for. We charged $10, and I felt really bad doing it because we've never charged for our member meetup. But what I really, really loved is I had more than 10 people come up to me and they were like, Trent, I can't believe you guys are charging this little for the shoot. And what that tells me is that the members are really happy. That's it. The shoot was always set up as a big thank you. It's a labor of love on our part. What I will say though is I am exhausted along with most of the crew. A lot of equipment to move in, a lot of setup. Essentially, we did 10 setups within, setting it up within an hour and 30 minutes, breaking it down and so forth. Worth every ounce of pain that we have, worth every ounce of physical misery that we have, because it was such a great atmosphere. Thank you for those who made it out. I'm sorry for those who couldn't make it out. But next year, always look for it. It's a big thank you to the members and a great time for all photographers of every skill set and models too. All right, guys, introduction to composition for photography. Here's a list of some of the things that we will cover. Breaking down photography compositions into the elements, like rules of thirds, balance, visual weight, leading lines, framing, simplification, color theory, just basics, patterns and textures, and more. And then applying these elements to photography, breaking the rules, and lots of examples and discussions. For those who know me, you know I tend to use a lot of cooking analogies. Even though I don't cook as much, it's a passion of mine. Food actually supersedes photography for me. Something I like to go ahead and tell people is the compositional elements they're just ingredients. And like with any recipe, to make it your own, you figure out what ingredients that you like more of, more salt, more pepper, whatever, or whatever you like less of. There really isn't any general rule. Another thing that some people know about me is I'm more of a stovetop cook or so on, and less of a baker. I don't really do precise rules too well. And so for those who are very much people who like precise measurements and so on, it is quantifiable when it comes to compositional elements, and there are rules that you can strictly follow. But I personally believe if you follow it to the letter and so more, and all that, you kind of lose a little bit of the organic art that comes with it. So we'll break it down to the elements, how you guys apply it. It's really your call, but it's really eye-opening as we go through this presentation, and you see some of the things that makes your photos stand out when it comes to compositional element. All right, so this is a little bit exactly what I just said before. Composition is subjective, guys. The rules of composition aren't meant to always be followed, but are general guidelines to help get a consistently great photo. This presentation will break down composition to base elements. Combining these elements can lead to amazing results, or you can keep it simple and just use a few or even one. So you don't necessarily have to use every compositional element that's presented here. Remember, it's a lot easier to break the rules if you know them. I applaud people who say, I don't want to follow the rules. I want to do something different. Well, you can't really break the rules if you don't know what's going on. The more you're aware of it, and the more you realize how you can skirt it to your benefit, to your art, I believe the better off you would be. This is also an introduction to composition. We will be covering only a small percentage of the theories and ideas. If you're extremely interested in this, you can take composition classes, and it's about 10 weeks of composition classes that you can take. There's some actually great classes that you can take at community colleges, just like Gwinnett Tech and so forth, just on composition, and it really helps. Composition is really, really neat, and the theory of it is amazing. This slightly relates to it, but I want to go ahead and mention it. One of the benefits I like about composition and following compositional rules is it helps create a consistently successful photograph or set of photographs. We all get lucky. We all get one photo that looks great, and so everything just falls into place. But then when you're consistently taking photos over several years, you're gonna have to find a way or something that works where you can consistently get good photos. Something I always ask people is, what is a professional photographer? Well, the most basic thing is professional photographer is someone who gets paid. The other thing too is people hire you to consistently get the photos you've taken before. Not the photos that you will take, but the photos you have taken. And so if you're consistently able to get them, you notice the keyword here, consistent, then you'll succeed at it and you'll be better and better. The use of compositional elements allow you to succeed over and over and over again. Something I've found is following the rules of composition, a majority of your shots will actually look good. You're going to have that rare shot, that 1% or that 5% shot that you normally would never shoot, that stands out and is amazing. You're always going to have that that shot that's going to look great. But as you look over someone's body of work, you'll be surprised at how much the rules of composition really apply, and just really make their images stand out. So as such, guys, composition is subjective. Want to go ahead and repeat that again. You don't have to follow every rule. I don't even know why they call it rules, but just being aware of them can be extremely helpful. All right, so why use compositional rules? Composition helps define your subject and also can highlight and lead your viewers to your subject. Good composition can make your photos go from a snapshot to a photo your viewers engage and reads. One of the best things ever is when someone looks at one of your photos and they just don't go to the next one. They actually start reading it. They start giving a little bit of their time as they see the nuances that you've put in your photos. The cool part is when you get comfortable enough with composition that it becomes subconscious to you, that you can concentrate on your subject, place them in a certain location, do a certain thing, frame them a certain way, as you do your photography, where your viewers that are going to see the image can go ahead and just be directed to read your photograph, to give it time, and to actually just look into it more than just a quick casual peek. And so it's pretty cool when it does that. So it grabs the viewer's eyes and makes them explore and give time to the image. After getting used to the rules, they become subconscious. You will develop a unique style that may emphasize certain rules. Personally, my personal trait when it comes to composition is I tend to actually focus and recompose in my camera to the rule of thirds. It's just something like I use the focus points that are in the camera. I actually just use it on the center focus point, and then after focusing on the center, I focus and recompose and move the subject to the rule of thirds on the camera. And so it's just something where subconsciously part of my style is to go ahead and just apply that in. 1 second. Okay, guys, moving forward. So compositional elements can be used at any time. As we go through this presentation, you don't have to just do compositional elements when you're taking the photo. When you're doing post-processing, you could apply it then. What's really cool in Lightroom, I don't know if any of you guys know this, I'm a huge Lightroom junkie. When you click the crop tool and you press O, you will go through multiple options for different compositional or different cropping compositional elements for when it comes to rules of thirds or so forth. So composition rules can be applied during the photo or even after during post-processing. Some are a lot easier to apply before the fact, while others, such as rule of thirds, is easier to do in post-processing. Ideally, compositional elements will be arranged before the shoot, and post-processing will be used to enhance an image rather than fixing it. As you get used to it, guys, rather than fixing it in post-processing, as you shoot more and more and more and more, and you figure out what your style is and what compositional elements you love, you're going to see that you do it more often before you press the button than you would after you press the button. 1 second, guys. Let me check up on something real quick. Let me see here. All right, moving forward. All right, guys, let's start with the first compositional element we're going to talk about, which is rule of thirds. This is placing your subject. So this is where you would place your subject in your frame. All right. So the rule of thirds is take an image and divide it into three horizontally and vertically, as you guys can see on the image to the left. You're going to get nine. You're going to get 9 frames roughly. The idea of the rule of thirds states that if your main focus point is around where the lines intersect, you will have a more visually pleasing image. The idea is that if you place an object or a line in the middle, it divides your image into 2. So essentially, if you have an object directly in the middle, it really divides the image. It divides your viewer's attention to either the left hemisphere or the right hemisphere. If you move your subject towards where the rules of thirds are, it makes it less left hemisphere or right hemisphere, and makes it a whole complete image. There's going to be an example that I show you guys in a little bit where you can really see this. All right, so placing subject. I personally swear by the rule of thirds. I place subject subconsciously 90% of the time in one of the intersecting lines or points. I also make sure that the subject faces into the negative space of the image and not outside. And so that's important to you guys. If I place a model on the left side of the image, I tend to have them look towards the right side of the image, because there's another compositional element called leading lines. And what we do is, as a viewer, we look at the subject's face and where they're staring, and we follow them into where the direction of their gaze. And so if I have a subject looking outside of the frame, well, I'm reading outside of the frame. I'm looking towards a place that's not populated. If the subject's looking towards if their subject's on the left and they're looking towards the right, then it's going to lead into the other parts of the frame. And so the great thing about rule of thirds is it makes you mentally aware of what is your subject and where you're putting them. You may know what your subject is, but it really helps define it for your viewers. And so what I mean by that is when you guys are out there shooting and taking pictures, more than likely you want to either see the photo yourself later or you want to show it to people. One of the easiest ways to direct your viewers' attention to what needs to be seen, but also the scenery around them, is to use the rule of thirds. Place them in a position that's attractive to look at, and then using other things just like depth of field and so on to put the focus point on them. You place them in a pleasing composition area and you go from there. So looking at the example photos above of Sarah on the left and Christina on the right, you can see that the subjects aren't directly in the middle. What I want you guys to get out of it is if you look at the picture, you kind of see the whole picture. The other thing too is what you may notice is with the subject, there could be other elements in there that might get your eye because of the rule of thirds. With the black and white picture of Sarah on the left, there's the mason jar full of flowers that are on the bottom left, and that's in a position closer to one of the rule of thirds. And if we just actually took Sarah out of the picture and that was in focus, that could be a place where some people say, hey, that works well. 1 second, got a question here, going to answer it. All right. Going back to this one, you guys see this building here. Something I really like about the right-hand image is don't just look at the building per se. That's the yellow building with the skyline, which I think this is a gorgeous shot. Look towards where the horizon is also. And as you see the horizon, it's actually on the bottom 2/3 of the rule of thirds, and it's not directly in the middle. If you put a horizon line right in the middle of your image, it splits it into two. The use of rules of third here is actually more than just the building, but also the horizon line, and creates in my opinion, a stronger image. All right, so placing your subject. Another one of placing your subjects is the golden triangle. This is just another rule that works really well for some people. The golden triangle is another way to place your subject. Instead of straight lines, it's just using diagonals also. This is great because having a subject tilted in any way can express movement in an image. It can express it can make your image more dynamic. And so with the use of the golden triangle, my suggestion is look up on the internet, figure out, read the rule of thirds, read golden triangle, and it will actually go ahead and show you also other alternatives that when it comes to placing your subject. Later, we're going to talk about balance, and the golden triangle is really, really good about making balance or making balance come out in your image. All right, placing your subject, horizontal lines. Using either rule, something that is consistently promoted is avoid putting your horizon line in the center of an image. We went back and talked about the picture of the building, the yellow building with the blue sky. Look at this picture on the left here. I bet some of you guys, when you looked at that image, thought it was two different images. It happens to a lot of people. There is a broad stroke line right in the middle. What's happening here, though, is there's a subject sitting on the bottom, looking up right at you, and right behind her is an art table, and it's actually one image. This is what happens this is what happens when you put a horizon line right in the middle of an image. It really splits the image into two. And so for those who didn't, those who noticed that it was one image, good for you. But I would go ahead and say a lot of the viewers who initially see it would actually kind of have a, not give it the attention that it needs or the proper attention that the image needs, because already from the get-go, they think it's two different images, and it doesn't register immediately that it's just one image. You don't have to do this all the time. Once again, you might want to go for that effect, but just understand that composition-wise, if you place a line right directly in the middle of your image, it's going to pretty much split up the image in half. All right, so if you look in the image on the right, using the rule of thirds, the horizon line is on the bottom 2/3 of the image. You can do a horizon line on the top 2/3 also, and that has worked well, or that does work well too. So my suggestion, though, if you're doing landscapes or so forth, is focus more on the bottom 2/3 for horizon line and have more sky in. And so if you look at the image on the right, it follows that. I think it looks great. It doesn't have to be precisely on the line. It could be a little bit above or a little bit below, but it's not directly in the center. All right, so various other ones of placing your subjects you can find on the internet. I hate saying, hey, you can just look it on the internet, but there's a lot of great different ones and a lot of great theories to it. So we've only mentioned a few guidelines for placing your subject. There may be different methods that fit your needs better, but also depending on what you do, or whatever your subject type is for photography, a different compositional, you know, or a different rule of composition for placing your subject could be better. Like the Fibonacci spiral on the right is more. I forgot exactly what it is, but it's pretty neat. I would suggest reading it, but I don't remember the rule that's on the left here. But it leads, I believe, it deals with leading lines and also with architecture and how to work that there. So depending on your needs as a photographer, if you do portraiture, if you do architecture, if you do landscapes, there's a different compositional type of cropping that you can do for each one that has been proven to be very successful at drawing your viewers in. Got to repeat again too that you don't necessarily have to follow it to the T. You can change it up and down a little bit, but after seeing thousands and thousands and thousands of photos, the huge percentage of them that follow the rule of compositions stands out as being more attractive than those that don't. All right. Another rule of composition, guys, is leading lines. Once again, we talked about it earlier, and it's really cool, but making a photograph something you read is a great way to make it stand out. The use of leading lines helps this. Words in a book are leading lines. For the Western culture like us, we start from the left, we start from the top, we read to the right, and then we go down. It's like reading, it's reading a page of a book. So using the same idea in your photographs, you have an element, you have a line that guides your viewers through the image. And if you're able to do that, you can really make them start going to the point of focus that you have in your image. The use of leading lines really helps this. Leading lines are design elements that lead your viewer's eyes through the image, and the subject is likely at the end of the line. I took this picture way back when I was in college getting my photography degree. I don't think it's a great picture, but I think it's a good example image of what I'm talking about. With Western culture, once again, we start in the upper left. So there's a lot of people who may look on the upper left and follow that calm trail. And as it goes down and it swoops through the image, this great nothingness that's in front of us, it leads into a simple street light that was at my school at Gwinnett Tech. Once again, I don't think this is an award-winning photo, but the general idea behind it is you're following the line, which is directly right in front of you, and it goes right into your subject, and it spoon feeds you. What I want you to look at. And so one of the cool things about compositional elements is we can really get our viewers to look where we want them to look. Using leading lines, we direct their eyes to where we want them to look. So another one, rule of composition, leading lines. Here's an example of leading lines through a rather simple photograph. I can go ahead and say here, there's a few of you guys who are looking at this now, and you're looking at this and you're going down the road. You're just used to it. You're going down in whatever way, form, fashion that you would go through. What I do love, though, is there's what's called oh my goodness. Oh, we'll go to the next slide and then we'll go there. Oh wait, sorry. Implied leading lines. Lines that are there are lines that aren't there, but subconsciously we know to follow. And the implied leading lines in this image are the arrows. If you guys look at the arrows, because of how we are as we've done our driving classes and stuff like that, we look at those arrows and we know to look to the left. So the leading lines from those arrows are telling us to follow it and go to the left. And so there's a lot of you who may have started this image from the bottom and gone up, because also you're looking at the lines and they're pointing left. Now, a few of you guys may have come from the back and follow the image from the back. You guys could do whatever you want, but I just wanted to show you guys how having a line in your image leads your viewers through it. All right, so another rule of composition leading lines is the implied leading lines that we've mentioned before. I will go ahead and tell you guys, this is a really strong one. Implied leading lines can really make or break a portrait, or actually can really make a portrait stand out. And so a great family shot here, this engagement that you see, is grandpa and grandson on the left. Love this image. Leading lines between their eyes guide you from one to the other. Puppy over there is completely disinterested in this photo, and so he's looking away. And so for those, some of you guys may have liked the puppy, if you notice he's looking off the frame. But the engagement that comes with this, with the leading lines, is easily read in this photograph. I think it's a successful photograph. Another successful photograph is Jane Mansfield and Sophie Loren on the right. A very, very popular image that a lot of people are aware of. Look at that look on Sophie's face. Look at that disgust. But look at her eyes and look at that leading line that's completely showing you, you know, what she's looking at and what guides through the image. And so, I mean, heck, you can even see the image that comes either before or right after that scene, and you can tell what she's still looking at and the look at her face. And so I love that image as an example of leading lines in an image. And so my suggestions when you guys are doing your photos, no, you don't necessarily need, you know, gigantic cleavage to be a part of it, but you can find something that directs your viewers into looking towards implied lines and so forth. Ways to do this, you know, since Meet and Shoot's mostly doing portraiture, is when I do a headshot, I always try a couple of headshots with the model's fingers on their face. And then as the fingers close into the eyes or point towards the eyes or so on, it really draws your eyes, because the fingers are lines, and fingers are, we're also used to pointing with fingers. You can get your viewers to move or follow the line towards eyes, towards things that you want them to look at. And so using other elements that we'll talk about later, those are the small little things that I do to continue to get different type of photos within one photo shoot. And so once again, using, you know, fingers or using eyes to go ahead and direct your viewers to tell you, or to tell them where to look, and to also get, you know, a different set of photos. All right, so leading lines works great, guys. Another one in composition is framing, and framing I adore. One of the fastest ways to really show your viewers your subject is to frame it. Framing can go from the obvious to the subtle. This is why putting a vignette on a photo can create a great point of focus. Looking at the picture of Madison on the left, I used the twigs to go ahead and frame her in the image. The twigs are a little bit out of focus. Some of them are in focus, but she has a path of clarity, a circle of clarity that you see, and it kind of puts the focus on her. I love that. The picture of Christian on the right, I used the door. Great location. I missed the goat farm. A Christian sitting in a door frame at the goat farm, and the door frame, it's a frame, frames him in this image. What I do like about frames, guys, is it really, really tells your viewers, look here. You know, if you want something super simple and super easy, bring a picture frame with you. Take a picture of someone holding it up and putting their face in the picture frame. The photo's going to instantly say, look here. You know, that's how it works. That's how our eyes work. You know, if someone is or if you're taking a close-up headshot of someone, if they do a motion where they just, once again, using the fingers and putting up against their face, it really frames their face, and it really helps your viewers know, okay, this is exactly what I want. I want you to look at. or this is exactly what, I'm going to look at in this guy's image. And so framing is a great compositional element that you should be aware of. And so when it comes to framing and comes to photography, guys, the resources that you use to do it is, you can use any resources. My only suggestion is avoid framing your subject with something that's lighter than your subject. The way our eyes work is we are attracted to the brightest part of an image. So with Madison's like dress being pure white, it really helps her stand out because our eyes go to the brightest part of an image. If she was wearing pure black and her surrounding was pure white, then our eyes will scatter and go around towards where the brightest part of the image is. And so something I have, I highly suggest to students when I used to teach composition classes and also just photography classes is don't just look at an image and go on. Occasionally look at an image, look away, look at something else, and look back at the image, and immediately like kind of blur your eyes out, kind of like one of those like little magic eye things back in the day where you never really had your eyes straight. Look at an image quickly and see where your eyes directly go to. I believe for a majority of you guys, it's going to be the brightest part of the image. And so framing itself too, once you guys are practicing it as a compositional element, remember to go ahead and also make sure your subject is a little bit lighter, or lit so they have more lighting on them, and that's a way to get. That's another form of framing. That's why vignetting is extremely successful at getting your viewers to really see the meat of the image, which tends to be in the center. When you vignette an image, you darken the outsides just a little bit. If you look at this picture of Madison on the left, you can see obvious vignetting where the tone is a little bit darker on the outside than it's in the inside. Maybe that's a little bit more on the extreme end for some of your guys' taste. Maybe you can vignette it a little bit more. But what I can go ahead and tell you is a lot of viewers here are looking at more the center and Madison, and rather than the outside, because we darkened the outside, or because the image was darkened on the outside. You really don't have a lot of viewers putting their attention out there compared to on the inside. And let me take a drink of Powerade here, and then we'll continue. All right, moving on forward, guys. More framing. Once again, I mentioned this in the next slide. I should probably be aware of the slides I have coming up because otherwise I'll sound like a broken record here. Viewer eyes tend to go straight to the brightest part of the image. So try to limit how bright it is outside the frame. Looking at this picture on the left here, guys, I will go ahead and say this. I love the idea. I don't believe this is a successful image. Look away, look back, and ask yourself, what is the subject of this image? I know the photographer wants the subject to be two people, one that looks like a very short Mulder, and the other one that looks like she's dressed as Scully, who's the same height as Mulder in this picture. There's two people holding hands, and you barely notice it. What I do see, though, is the ornate texture on the brick, or the ornate texture on the stone, the keystones and stuff like that, because it's so bright. Once again, our eyes go to the brightest part of an image, and it is framing on the left-hand image. The idea I really like about this image that you see, I like the feel of it, but I think the brightness of the upper left-hand corner, or the brightness of the the tunnel wall, really takes away from the meat of what the photo is. If you guys have a chance, if you're close to your monitor, take your hands and cover the wall as much as you can so there's only a little bit left, and make a dominant part of the image the couple that you see. And I think the brightness surrounding them really draws your eyes in at the end of the tunnel, and their silhouette becomes more prominent, and I believe it's a stronger image. I love the image on the right. The image on the right, using framing, look at the leading lines that are there. The subject's pinky fingers. I don't know, unfortunately, if it's male or female. I don't know so I'll go ahead and say his hands. Hopefully it's him. his hands are pointing. I love the pinky fingers pointing towards the eyes. I love the, how just in general you see the tension, but also what's really important is a framing element that you see here is the subject's face is lit and they're surrounded by the darkness that's coming from the hair, from the hands, from the face, and so forth. And it really focuses your eyes right into the meat of the image. I really, really, really love this shot. And it really, I've used it for a while. I should probably research it more because I don't know who the photographer is. I don't know who, if the subject's male or female. It's horrible for me to say that. But as long as I've taught composition, it's been several years now. I love this shot as an example of framing, a little bit of leading lines, but also another element that we'll talk about, which is texture, which there's a lot of texture in the image. But once again, using the idea that the brightest part of the image is where your eyes go to, that's what I want you guys to immediately, see. Look away from the image, look back, and even before you establish focus, kind of figure out where your eyes are going. Why I keep on repeating this, guys, is with your own photography, it really applies too. As you're trying to figure out what you want to do as a photographer, if you're newer or if you're already experienced, what you most experienced photographers, what they'll go ahead and tell you is, getting your subject or getting your viewers to go ahead and like see your subject fairly quickly and not be confused what they're looking at means you probably have a more successful image. And so that's one of those things. Light the subject a little bit more, and it's one of the tools that will get your image to be immediately more, stand out, or your viewers will definitely know what they're looking at in comparison to, having everything in focus, everything the same brightness level, etc. All right, another rule of composition is simplification. Here's a great line from foodors.com, which reminds me, or looks like a Hodor with an F. So I guess it's Photos. Trying to pack too much information to a photograph is like cramming too much into your suitcase. It only makes the things that you're looking for that much harder to find. A good photograph reveals a single subject or an idea with as little clutter as possible. One of the funnest things that someone who's new into photography loves getting is a shallow depth of field lens, a 51.8, something like that, because you start blurring out your background and you're simplifying it, or you're simplifying the background, making it blurry, and you're really putting clarity and focus on your subject. That's the same principle and idea behind this. Simplification essentially just means don't complicate it. Don't put so much into it that your viewer is seeing pretty much a huge gumbo pot of, I have no idea what the hell I should be looking at. Sometimes that could be successful, but a majority of the time, people do enjoy looking at an image where they know what the photographer wants them to look at, wants them to focus on. So simplification is a very important thing. And so it's more outside composition here, but guys, be aware of your background. This shot could actually be better in some ways without the fire spinner in the back. But I will go ahead and say this too: the person spinning the fire in the background helps define the what Emerald is in the shot. Emerald being the person that you guys see in this photo. She is dressed, and she's dressed very eclectically, looks gorgeous, but she has no tools or props to show what she does. In the background, you have a person spitting fire, and I think it helps tell the story more. And so it's one of those things where it's arguable, but there's nothing else that's really complicated in the background, including a lot of people, or unfortunately now, a lot of people with iPhones or Droids taking pictures of performers doing stuff like this. Moving forward, we find patterns and shapes attractive. So outside of simplification, it goes into patterns here, patterns and repetition. We find patterns and shapes attractive. The linear patterns and lines in this image can quickly attract the eye. There's also patterns in the color. And so what stands out to people who are looking at this is different and subjective to each other. Some of you guys may follow the diagonals. I tend to be a diagonal person. Other patterns I tend to follow are the numbers. I see 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. as soon as I see numbers, some of you guys know this. Rachel knows it. Thomas knows it. I am the biggest number guy, so I just look at numbers and that's what I see. Some of you guys may have noticed the colors. Some are lighter yellow, some are closer to green, and you may notice a pattern that's in it. Um, Not as many people will follow it as a left to right, a left to right thing. Most people follow their own pattern in diagonal. So whatever you find, or whatever floats your boat, is what stands out. But repetition and pattern is a great thing to to be able to go ahead and shoot in a photograph. Patterns can be found in lines, shapes, colors, and more. So don't just look at the lines and the shapes you see, but also the colors. Looking at this image above of this fern thing, that's my my agricultural expertise right there. It's more than just the swoops in the fern, but it's the circles that are in the water beads. And what you'll notice is there's not many straight lines in this shot. A lot of it is flowing, circular movements, which consistently show up in this image. And so that is the pattern. That is the repetition that is in this image. And I believe a straight line would actually take away from this image. Let's go ahead and point that out. Notice all the way on the bottom. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but on the bottom here, there's this little straight line. Just look at that and just keep your eyes on that. And that's pretty much like one of the only straight lines in the shot. There's a few others there, and that doesn't look like it belongs as much as everything else. And that's a stray from the shape, the pattern, and so on. For those who for those who are reading in between the lines and what they can get out of that, if you really want a successful shot that works with stray elements, imagine a sea full of people dressed in red, and then you have a person dressed in white, or a sea full of people dressed in black, and then you have the lady dressed in red that was in the Matrix. Stuff like that. Little techniques where you break the pattern and you get your viewers to see it. And so a little bit later, we talk about breaking patterns, but what I want you guys to see here is compositional wise, patterns and repetition in your image, use of lines, shapes, colors, and more. All right, now for the next part, breaking a pattern. Breaking a pattern could create a great visual cue for your viewers to look at. Immediately, if we look away from this image and we look back, if you see it in black and white, you see a bunch of really circular shapes. You can see the softbox, or you can see the the lighting device, which I can go ahead and say here is a flash bouncing off the ceiling, lighting these little gumdrop looking things. Convert it to black and white, get all the tones the same, and it will look like one repetitious pattern. But now with the red one being right there, it really breaks the pattern, and it immediately gets you to look at the in the sea of similar looking objects. It makes you realize what stands out. And so that's a great way of breaking the pattern, and a great way of putting focus on a subject. And once you can also argue that this is also framing the subject there. The subject is so different from its surroundings that it's framed, and that's what you're looking at. All right, so this is going a lot faster than I expected. So I don't only think this lecture is only going to go for about an hour. Let me check to make sure that there's no questions or anything. It looks like most people are happy. The next one we're going to go to, guys, is texture. Give me a second. Talk to Johnny. Hey, Johnny. You watching this? Let me message Pat, too. We're so informal with these things. Patrick. I'm on the Book of Face, messaging people here during a live presentation. Oh, really? That's odd. Oh, my goodness. Hey, Sean, thank you so much. So it is a him. Sean mentioned to me that the pictures of Miles Davis. I will admit that I am a dumbass because I knew that. It's been so long since I've seen the picture. popular jazz musician. Sean, thank you so much for pointing that out to me. That is my, I want to go on the record of how idiotic I am during this presentation when it comes to my knowledge of certain shots. I've looked at that image so long on a technical merit of why I found it successful that I haven't given it the proper credit or research it deserves. Thank you so much, buddy. All right, going to it, guys. Rule of composition: use of textures. Use of textures in a photograph can help really bring a tangible feel to the photograph. While keeping with the concept of simplicity, the use of textures on your subject or around your subject can bring memory up from your viewers. Textures are an amazing way for a photo to make a photograph stand out. One of the best ways to get texture to come out on an image, guys, is lighting. When lighting is directly onto your subject, you fill every crevasse with lighting. You fill everything with light, and you take away contrast, you take away shadows. As you take your lighting and move it away from the camera and move it away from your subject so it's not straight on, every little imperfection on your subject starts standing out. And so shadows are cast, you have depths, or you have valleys and peaks of light, valleys of shadows, and you really get to see that. And so if you're taking macro shots, guys, try moving your light source so that it's not directly on your subject, but a little bit towards the left, a little bit towards the right, and you'll start getting extra texture in your image. If you look at the picture on the of the leaf, you can see where the light's coming from. The light's coming from the left, camera left, and slightly below, and it's taking a little bit more, or it's adding a little bit more of the texture that's on the leaf. Something that really, the texture on the right of Shauna is, for those who haven't done this before, I do this all the time. We've been doing this for years. Is go to Starbucks, ask them, hey, can I have your used coffee grounds? They'll probably give it to you because it's a good fertilizer. You never really have a problem with it. Or heck, just go ahead and brew some coffee and then take the coffee grounds, and then just put it on your model. If they're okay with it, just have them take a handful of coffee grounds. Put some baby oil in it. It helps. It helps put a little bit more moisture in a binder in, and just put it on their, just have them put it on their face and so forth, and you get texture in. It looks like dirt, and it looks really cool. And you add another compositional element in, which is the use of textures and patterns and so forth into the image. All right, the lack of texture. Opposite of what we just did there, which is, put the coffee grounds and so forth. The lack of texture also helps your viewers glide from one point of contrast to another. Imagine it just as a bunch of space, a bunch of empty space in text. So your eyes immediately go to the next word. And so the lack of texture can also help your viewers glide from one point of contrast to another. Models such as Josie over here with stunning complexions stand out as viewers aren't interrupted by dips and divots in their skin. Be aware, though, that removing too much details makes the subject go from looking natural to looking wrong. In Hollywood, this is one of the things that are part of the uncanny valley. When someone actually sees an image or sees a picture of someone, or something that's computer generated, and it doesn't look right. But let's talk about it in a photography aspect. Looking at the image of Josie on the left here, what you'll see is texture in her hair. You'll see texture in her lips, texture in the flowers, and also the contrast and the framing that comes from her eyes. On her skin tone itself, and she has really good skin tone, guys. There's not like editing where I'm gonna go ahead and Photoshop the complexion on her face. She just has very nice skin tone. You kind of just sort of glide through there. It's just it's like snow. You just pan through it until the next object that catches your eye. And so this is one of those things that you can do in an image to really, get your viewers to just skim over a part, but then you can put something else in it. So more than just, let's say, a headshot of someone that has great skin tone, think of other things like, snowy landscapes, water photos, stuff like that, on how you can use a lack of texture to guide your viewers or glide your viewers through a image. And then you can have what you want them to see or something contrasty that stands out. Moving forward, and we're going fairly quickly here, so I think we are going to be done sooner than later because I think we are about 85% through. It's the rules of composition, color theory, guys. Color is important in an image, but I will go ahead and say this. I am not the strongest person when it comes to colors. I have a very, very base palette that I like, but I also have an understanding of certain feel that colors give, and that leads into warm and cool colors. It's pretty cool to know what they do, so when you're doing your images, you can have a general idea of what your colors are representing to your viewers. Warm colors, which if you look at this color wheel that's on your left, warm colors are what's on the upper left-hand portion. On the bottom right-hand portion is cool colors. Color in an image can express emotion and design. It's an extremely important compositional element. It's extremely important, guys. It can really make a difference in your photos. Warm colors are vivid and energetic and tend to advance in space. Cool colors give an impression of calm and creates a soothing impression. This is critical as you combine things, or even if you have a black and white shot and you add a little bit of color tone to it. If you make it more sepia or if you make it more cyanotype, it really can make it feel more industrial or more alive. And it really has a effect on how your viewer sees the image. So looking at this picture of Jeanette in front of you, you can really see the difference between difference in warm and cool and portraiture and white balance. This is a hyper exaggerated shot, guys. More than likely, most of you guys aren't gonna have something this off. But look at Jeanette on the left, where it's warmer tones. Jeanette looks more alive, for one thing. The subject looks more dynamic, where on the picture on the right, with the cooler tone, she looks like she's sick. That's the thing. We have a person in front of us, so it's something that we can all relate to because we're all people. Is when someone looks cooler and a little paler, unfortunately, they don't look as alive. So if you're wondering why, if you buy a reflector and one reflector is gold and one reflector is silver, if you have someone who's really tan, use the silver. If you have someone who's really pale, you might actually be better using the gold. Unfortunately, gold reflectors in photography tend to be very gold. And so if anyone's at their computer and you're looking to buy a reflector soon, look for something called, I know one of the words for it's California Sunbounce. But look for interwoven silver and gold, or a sunlight reflector. And that's going to be a reflector that's interwoven with silver and interwoven with gold. And you get the best of both worlds rather than a superbly golden Oompa Loompa shine that's going to make your subject look as Guido as possible. So what you should get out of this, though, is color theory. Having your subject slightly warmer makes them look more alive. So for those who are wanting, what can you do? How can you immediately apply it? White balance on your camera is coolness and warmth. Studio photography is about 5,500 degrees Fahrenheit, or sorry, 5,500 degrees. Sorry, not Fahrenheit, Kelvin. And 5,500 degrees gives you a nice sterile white balance shot on a flash. Well, if you set your camera, and you put it at 5,800 degrees, you're artificially pumping in a little bit more warmth, and it actually makes your subject look that much more alive. People have asked me, Trent, do you show people pictures on your LCD when you shoot? The answer is yes. I always get my white balance correct, or I always get it close to what I need it to be, and I show the subject. When a subject sees a picture of them and they're blue, and that's your white balance is completely off, they don't automatically think, okay, this is a photographer, he can fix it. They wonder, why am I blue? What's going on here? What's wrong with me? But if you show them a picture and the white balance is correct, it could look good. Now imagine if you have that white balance a little bit warmer on your camera. they look that much more alive. Don't turn it up all the way to 6,500. Don't turn it all the way up to 7,000 if you're shooting in the studio. Turn it all the way to 5,800, Kelvin, and you have that little bit of edge on it. So something I've actually found interesting, and this is not a shot against Nikon, guys. As much as a lot of you guys know that I joke a lot about Nikon and Canons, I love both camera systems, and I actually even love Sony's too. But something I've noticed a lot is Canon LCDs. I don't know what it is, but they tend to show warmth a little bit better. Not the final results. I actually think Nikon and Canons are actually on par with getting very similar results on their sensors, but something with the LCDs where the LCDs just look so much better on the Canon side when it comes to portraiture. Um, I've, one of the benefits of running meet and shoot and doing APG before and all that is I saw thousands and thousands of photographers, and wasn't rare to have a Nikon shooter look at a Canon camera and just go, why does that look better? And I'll go ahead and say this: no, the Canon camera was not better. They're both good cameras. The LCD was a little bit better because I think the warmth on the Canon LCD was that much better. 1 second. All right, moving forward, guys. More color theory here, guys. Looking at the color wheel that you see on the left, you can cross. It's like a Chinese zodiac or something like that. For those who aren't really aware of color theory, I believe most of us are, because in high school they taught us a little bit of color, color theory class. Looking at the wheel, you can see either complementary colors or analogous colors and see what works with each other. And surprisingly, if you look into either school uniforms and so on, you'll see a lot of this being used. So complementary color schemes, for a long time, I thought this was contrast color schemes, but I had, after taking this class and teaching it for a while, I believe this is correct, but let me make sure. Complementary colors are colors that are opposite each other in the color wheel are considered to be complementary colors. Example, red and green. When I said red and green, guys, what do you immediately think of? I think a lot of you guys are going to say Christmas. Red and green is very, very, Christmassy, but the high contrast of complementary colors creates a vibrant look, especially when used at full saturation. This color scheme must be managed well so it's not extremely jarring. So for clothing, what you want to think of is like where you've seen is think of college football teams. Example, Florida, LSU, stuff like that. There's a lot of teams that use colors that are opposite of each other. And not everyone wants to look like a football player. Not everyone wants to look like a cheerleader from LSU or Florida or anything like that. So it's just one of those things. I'm trying to think of the other teams. I think the Hurricanes may have it. I think Florida's blue and orange. I'm trying to remember. I'm not a Florida fan. So stuff like that. So complementary colors are those opposite of each other, yet they can really stand out and look pretty if paired well. Analogous color schemes are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. They usually match well and create a serene and comfortable design. Since your eyes aren't going from this jarring jump of one color to immediately another one, analogous colors are more harmonious, are often what you find in nature, and very pleasing to the eyes. In portraiture, think of matching hues in the outfits for a family or matching tones for an individual. Rather than, or if your subject's wearing clothing and you don't want it to be about the clothing and more about the subject, more than likely they're going to have an analogous color scheme for their clothing rather than a complementary color scheme where it becomes less about how your subject looks and more about the accessories they have on them and so forth. All right. I love the shot. This is a shot that shows complementary color schemes. Orange and red. Looks great. Surprisingly, doesn't make you think about Christmas at all. But there's other elements too, including a funky like JPEG compression issue on the upper right hand corner. I don't know what's going on there, guys. But if you look at this image, you have shapes and patterns. you have leading lines. I don't know how many of you guys are starting from the bottom left. I tend to look at an image and start from the upper portion. But as you sweep through the image, you got a lot of color tone. You got greens, you got reds, you got what's considered warmth, and you got what's considered cool. I love this picture. You even have the texture because they sprayed the apples with water. Um, Simple. I love this shot. What I really like about this shot too is there's no central point of focus. There's not something directly in the center that I'm going to look at. The image itself becomes the image that I'm looking at. So this is one of the images that, it's not Pulitzer material in my mind, but it's something that looks pretty cool and shows really complementary colors really well. Analogous color schemes. In this case, a lot of this is going to be happening soon, guys. It's fall. It's coming in. I think it looks super pretty. Let me see here. Johnny says link isn't functioning to his phone. So if anyone's watching on their phone and it hasn't started, guys, I will go ahead and say this. This presentation's archived. Some of you guys are watching it live. It looks like there's about 20 viewers right now. But those who got the link and it's not working, then this is archived. So you guys will be able to watch it later. As I don't even know why I'm saying that now, because they're not going to hear that until they watch it later. But analogous color schemes, looking at this above, notice the tone, guys. There is complementary colors here. There is opposite colors. There's reds and greens and so forth. But a dominant amount of this is colors that are close to each other on the color wheel. And I love this shot. I love the leading lines that are in this photo. You have a path. If you look at the horizon line, it's on the bottom 2/3. It works well, but also the framing elements that comes from the trees, that stands out as a way of helping this image too. But looking at the color, it really stands out as something that is analogous in color scheme. All right. So when it comes to color theory, guys, a whole class can be given on color theory. I am not the best person to talk about it, and I'll be honest there. I really don't look at colors and can say, I can't paint a room. I can't tell you two colors that work well. It's never been a strength of mine. Rachel, her mom wants me to dress in different color clothing all the time. My different color clothing is I'll add a little bit of blue into my grays and my blacks. That's it. I'm not a very big different color guy. So something you may want to try doing and researching to see how color works is paint swatches are always free to go pick up and pick up from a hardware store and see how they work together. I know a lot of people have done that, and gotten great success with it. Not for just painting, but in general too, of what color works for clothing, what appeals to them. That's the way there. Use of specific color combinations can elicit strong emotions from people, such as Christmas colors and the warm colors of fall. With the holidays coming in, it will not be like rare to see certain color schemes. Just remember them. Like, let's say Halloween's coming up, and I can't believe it, 30 days. Orange and black, almost very much a Halloween type thing. And so we'll see a dominant amount of orange and black. With Thanksgiving coming in, with gourds, squashes, pumpkins, but not as much pumpkins, sweet potato pie, pumpkin pie, turkeys, and so forth. Warmer tones, browns, fall leaves, those are going to come in. Christmas comes around, guys, red and green. And other one too, candy canes, red and white. Those are dominant Christmas colors that you'll see that you can actually use in, or the color you can use in your compositions. When dealing with colors, remember, you don't have to give colors equal attention. You can just use a subtle amount of a certain color to create depth, contrast, and dimension. And so it's not just the reddest reds and the greenest greens and the bluest blues. Use a subtle amount. Go into the pastels, go into the vibrance. Use a vibrant blue and a pastel orange and see the results there and see if it appeals to you. But also recognize that color is a way to create framing, is a way to create, leading lines and so forth in your image. A lot of successful images have used color for leading lines and so on to really get a viewer to look at the image and the composition. All right. Moving forward, rules of composition, balance, and visual weight. Um, there are two types of balance: formal, which is symmetrical, and informal, asymmetrical. Symmetrical puts the weight of the composition in the center. This is good for a strong, tall building like structure, or for this is good for strong, tall objects like structures and buildings. You can place them at the center of your attention. Fortunately, this image here doesn't have a line that directly goes through the center. Otherwise, you're going to start talking, going to what we talked about before when it comes to the rule of thirds and dividing the image in half. What's really good here, though, is when it comes to composition, having a subject that's directly straight up and down really signifies strength and just stability. Having a subject that's completely laying horizontally, signifies rest and comfort, like you're not at attention. So a building that's directly in the center, try finding a building, guys, or try finding a picture of a building online and slightly tilt your view, or actually go look at a picture of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. What you'll notice is as soon as the building is slightly tilted, it becomes jarring and it becomes very dynamic and very wrong. What we're used to is a subject like a building being tall, straight, and stable. And so just piercing through the sky and pretty stable. And so pictures of architecture, pictures of building, and where this leads into also pictures of people. If you want your subject to look a little bit more stoic, complacent, whatever, their position matters, or how they're angled. If you have a subject that's standing straight and tall, they look a little bit more stiff, but it could be what you want. If you have a subject who's laying down, they look a little bit more relaxed. If you have a subject who's leaning, think of sports photos, anything like that, it looks more dynamic. So that's going to be something we mentioned in a little bit. All right. Asymmetrical balance puts the weight of the composition off center. This harkens back to the rule of thirds. This is more. This is better for more organic types of subjects or more free flowing. So instead of our symmetrical, which is another concept, symmetrical puts your subject directly in the middle, splits the image in half. You have, it splits either left and right or up and down. Asymmetrical makes it so you're off balance there, and now there isn't a left and right hemisphere. There's a center, or there is one central image with the subject that's slightly left and right. Going to the next one, both balances make great photographs, but what you really want to avoid is putting your main element close to the edge so that your balance is way off. Looking at this image, it's not bad, but as soon as you go to this one, by putting your subject way at the edge of the frame, you really lose a lot. So this is how the image was initially cropped, where you see this here, and then this is, I've seen some of you guys do this. I've done it myself. We know what the subject is, and that's the writer, and we've put it to the extreme edge. A lot of us know not to do this. So this is an obvious one, guys, but don't do this. Put your subject where the rule of thirds are. But what I also want to point out in this image, guys, here is leading lines. Look at the leading lines in this image. So you're going back to composition, other composition elements. Why I think this is a successful image. Look at the sand dunes and the shape of the sand dunes, and it'll give you a general direction of where he's gonna, where he's looking at, which is where he's going, which is the shape of the sand dune. But also the leading lines that comes from the visor, or where he's looking at. It kind of gives you a direction on where you're going. I love that about this one. As soon as you go to here, you kind of get the same thing, but it becomes really, really like off because he's so close to the edge. And so composition, balance, and visual weight, guys, don't put subjects right by the edge. Put your subject, rule of thirds, that there. Asymmetrical or symmetrical is your call. And when it comes to that dynamic shot like this with movement and so forth, where you want less stability, less structure, then I suggest focusing more on an asymmetrical balance. If you want something more stern, strong, then go for a more symmetrical balance. All right. Balance the weight. The tilt of your subject and surroundings can greatly affect how your subject is perceived by the viewers. A straight-up photo of the subject represents rigidness, strength, attention, and is great for men, buildings, structures, and synthetic structures. What I mean by that, it's not necessarily men. It's not a sex thing per se, but it's the representation of the sexes when it comes to when it comes to photography and art and so forth. Um, and in books and so forth, you hear about like the men being strong, tall individuals, stuff like that. So anyone who has a man-like persona, it could be a female, it could be a male, it could be an object, whatever, are strong, standing rigid, standing very militaristic light. Like looking at this image on the left here, guys, looking at a few things, we have a framing element, so let's point that out. But also we have rigidness that comes from the bars, it comes from the wall, and also the, just the posture of the groom. On the other end, more dynamic and more flowing, the bride in this shot, she's tilted. She's not standing as strong, and she's a little bit more dynamic. And that just shows a representation of a compositional rule of placing your subject, not that they're standing up straight, but with a little bit of a tilt and so forth to make them a little bit more dynamic. Something I want to go ahead and note out is if you guys ever look at a NASCAR car, look at the numbers on the side. They are never, ever just straight, like, Dale Earnhardt's number 3, or sorry, 8. Junior's 3. I'm trying to remember. Oh my goodness, I don't really do much NASCAR, but what I can go ahead and tell you is all of the numbers aren't straight up. They are, they're tilted, and that represents, or that shows movement, and just it looks dynamic. And so in your pictures, as you're looking at objects and so forth, a slight tilt can give it a lot of movement, can give it a lot of just dynamic action, where putting your subject straight up can make them look rigid, taller, and stronger. Putting your subject horizontally completely puts it at rest and makes it look sort of complacent and just staying still, and just kind of you know at rest and comfortable. All right. Objects tilted diagonally, going back to that, from little to extreme, showcases movement and fluidity. The more extreme the angle, the more movement, and in some cases, disorientation can occur. This is great for dynamic photographs of a subject, movement, and more. It might not be the best for buildings, think of the Leaning Tower Pizza, but it can be used in moderation. Once again, not telling you guys what to do, but if you have a picture of a building, if you're taking a picture of a building for your clients, uh, send them a picture of the building straight up and send them a picture of the building tilted. If you send them a picture of the building only tilted, it can be very discomforting. When it comes to a model, mostly anyone who's like running or so forth, adding a slight tilt, like this picture of Sarah on the right here, gives a sense of, gives us dynamic sense to the image, like there's movement occurring and so forth, and it just adds that extra element in. So it's just one of those things where be aware of how you're composing your image. Add a slight tilt, take a tilt away, and you can get a lot of either movement in it, or rigidity, depending on what you want to do. All right, so this is a short one, guys, because this is the very last slide. Before we go on and talk about this one, I want to go and say I did remove a few slides from this presentation because I used to give this presentation in a class. Composition is something that there is so much more than what we covered. What we covered is what really stands out, mostly in photography. But if you really, really, really want to up your game as a photographer, find a book on composition and just read it. Some of it may apply, some of it may not, but just read it and be aware of it. And what I find interesting is a lot of times we don't notice something until we see it, or until we're made aware of it, and then we can't stop noticing it. What you'll see is, in this world, which has been, built by designers and built by people who've taken these classes on color theory and so forth, you'll see a lot of these patterns. You'll have a beginning and understanding of understanding of what really sticks out as being attractive to look at and what sticks out as being completely clashing and something you don't want to look at. So leading on to one of the things, this is related to composition, but one of the things I love doing is there's a author, unfortunately he's passed away 10 years ago, but he's a makeup artist who also dwelled in photography, named Kevin Aucoin, Aucoin. And he has a few books like Face Forward, Making Faces and stuff like that. And he talks a little bit about color theory and makeup and what you can do to go ahead and emphasize and frame and do stuff like that. With your subject. It is a lot of it's very much like talking about celebrities and so on, but there's a lot of great information there, and it applies and it uses a lot of compositional elements. It breaks it down to the basics. That helps for photography. There are other things too. My suggestion is go to Amazon. If you have a Kindle or anything like that or so on, find a book on composition. Keep it as a weekend reader and take it in, read what composition elements might stand out to you that you can go ahead and take to make your image better. The reason why I started that is because this next one isn't really a rule of composition. It's just something to be aware of when you're taking photos, and that's perspective, guys. As an event shooter, one of the first things I tell people that as they assist me and as they work with me is be aware of your perspective. And what I mean by that is I'm a 6 foot tall guy. I'm not the tallest person in the world, but I am taller than your average person that goes to an event, your average person being both females and males. And so the first thing that you need to do as an event photographer to make people look natural is actually shoot towards their belly button, not shoot towards eye to eye. Because if I shoot eye to eye, I'm instantly moving my camera down and I'm putting my perspective and foreshortening or shortening their legs and bringing their foreheads to the forefront and making their heads look ginormous and their legs look skinny. Look at a lot of paparazzi photos, or look at a lot, not paparazzi photos, but look at red carpet photos, and you'll see photographers who are aware of either squatting down and making their subjects look good, or the photographers who are quickly shooting and shooting down at their subject, and so forth. So perspective is important, and one of the first things I love telling people is when you're shooting a subject, if you're shooting down at them, you're looking down at them, and they look beneath you. You're putting them in a position where they're beneath you. So looking at this image of the boy on the left, the photographer took a very successful shot because they squatted down, they laid on the grass, and they took a picture of the baby. Because if you look at the picture on the right, notice the dog. There's a distant, that's like an uncle who doesn't like a dog. Or that's like a dude who doesn't like a dog, and he's just looking down at it in disdain and saying that's a dog. But as you get further and closer down, you get a little bit more intimate, and if you look at, as you get further and further down, you look at the perspective of the subject involved, and there's more attachment there. On the bottom left, always be aware of different perspectives that you can shoot to get a different angle on things. And so it's one of those things, just be aware of it. I love that picture where it's behind the viewer or behind the reader, using the rule of thirds, taking it in the shot, and then the book is on the rule of thirds. He's placed, but he's blurry on the left hand side. Guys, it's a really short class. I wish there was a little bit more to say. The next few events are going to be a little bit longer. Shelton has suggested a really great event, but this is going to be at Photoplex that I'm looking forward to, and that's the how to repair your equipment, where we go ahead and we take lighting and stuff like that, and we show you how to pull light bulbs out, put light bulbs in, what's user replaceable, what's not, and so pretty much like how to fix things immediately to get you up and running. Because sometimes you're out there, you're shooting, and something happens, and it's scary, but you need to shoot. The class or this workshop is going to, or this member event's really going to showcase that. Super quick and easy one, guys. Here, hopefully you guys got a little bit out of it. I wish I could tell you guys more, but what it really is I'm introducing a lot of compositional elements to you, but you can really research them and get more into them. My suggestion is take what I told, or take some of the things I told you here that we're talking about, apply it, practice it, research it, and figure out what makes it your own here. Figure out why you like the rule of thirds, why you like the Fibonacci, or whatever it's called, why you like so many other things. Use of leading lines. I can promise you, leading lines creates a killer, a killer response to your photographs. If you're able to successfully use leading lines, you could directly guide your viewers through photos and really make it stand out. If you don't mind, not necessarily pimping my photos out, but if you go to if you go to Trent, give me 1 second. Having three computers here, I'm confused of which one's which. TrentChau.500px.com. What I do believe is if you go through images, you'll see the use of compositional elements that we've talked about. A dominant amount being framing and rule of thirds, stuff like that. You'll see those in the shots. Look at the vignetting. Look at the small little technical things that make up the image. And I believe you'll find where some images will stand out to you because of the use of compositional elements. Guys, thank you so much for yesterday. For those who came out, thank you for those who are a part of this tonight. Have a great night. Take care.